What is going on, everyone? Welcome into our latest TDR Cannabis in 5, presented by Dutchie, where we break down the biggest cannabis stories shaping policy and business. I'm your host, Shad Dills, and thanks for checking in. So today we're going to look at a big one, and it's about the Supreme Court, cannabis, and your constitutional right to bear arms. According to a new report from Marijuana Moment, the U.S. Supreme Court just denied one major case on gun rights for marijuana users. But here's the twist. The justices are preparing to discuss several others this week, so this is interesting. So the story is far from over. In fact, it may be just getting started. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's find out in our latest TDR Cannabis in 5, presented by Dutchie. All right, so here is the situation. The Supreme Court decided not to hear a case, what's called United States versus Baxter. It challenged a federal law known as Section 922, the rule that says anyone considered an unlawful user of a controlled substance, including cannabis, can't legally own a firearm. Now, that denial, known in legal terms as denying cert, means the court won't review the lower court's decision. But as Marijuana Moment reports, that doesn't mean the issue is settled. In fact, the justices plan to meet this week to decide whether to take up other related cases, and those could have bigger consequences for cannabis users nationwide. So let's dive deeper into those concerns and what they could mean moving forward. But first, a word from Morgan & Morgan. Hey everyone, there's a reason smart investors celebrate when their portfolio jumps 40% in a year, just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. Think about it. When you're investing, you want the right team in your corner. The same is true if you're injured in dealing with an insurance company, and that is where Morgan & Morgan comes into the equation. Why? Well, they've got more than 1,000 attorneys in over 100 offices nationwide, and they've been fighting for people for over 35 years, and their track record is hard to ignore. Let me explain a little bit further. Case in point, in Florida, a client was offered $350,000, but walked away with $12 million. In Pennsylvania, another client, they turned $650,000 offer into $26 million. That's a 40x return. So in total, Morgan & Morgan, they've recovered more than $25 billion for over 500,000 clients. So really, when you hire him, it's like bringing in a legal army that has your back. Because if you're injured due to someone else's negligence, you deserve to be paid. And let's be honest, not all law firms are created equal. But with Morgan & Morgan, their fee is free unless they win. You can start your claim right now by clicking the link in the description below or by scanning this QR code on your screen with your phone. At the end of the day, if you want what you deserve, make sure you go in with the right team by contacting Morgan & Morgan today. Now, let's get back to the rest of our video. All right, let's now look back on the Supreme Court and why this indeed matters. So the court's decision to deny the Baxter case isn't a rejection of the issue. It just means this wasn't the right case for them to take up. Marijuana Moment notes that both the Justice Department and Baxter's legal team actually urged the court not to hear it, so that's unusual. And it signals that Baxter may not have been the strongest setup to challenge the law. But now the court is looking at several other cases. Interesting here, including U.S. versus Hemani, Cooper, Daniels, and Sam, each of which questions whether people who legally use cannabis should automatically lose their Second Amendment rights. So let's first focus on the Hemani case for a second, because that's the one gaining the most traction right now. So this case involves a defendant convicted of having firearms while using both cannabis and cocaine, and allegedly engaging in drug sales. So it appears this is far beyond just cannabis. So it's not just about recreational cannabis user with a gun, it's more a complicated situation, and I can understand this, but here's cannabis getting wrapped into this. So legal experts say that's exactly why the court might pick it. It gives them a chance to test the boundaries of the law without directly ruling on people who are cannabis consumers only. So if Hemani becomes the chosen test case, it could define how the Supreme Court approaches cannabis and gun ownership for years to come. Doesn't seem right or fair for the cannabis industry, does it? And then meanwhile, there are courts already challenging the government's position here. Recent decisions from the 10th Circuit and 8th Circuit have said the federal ban may go too far, arguing that judges should evaluate individuals, not automatically treat all cannabis users as high risk. And that, to me, makes complete sense. Even the 3rd Circuit has pushed district courts to make individualized judgments about risk and responsibility. So this kind of pushback from multiple circuits is exactly what draws the Supreme Court's attention. When lower courts start splitting on how to apply the same law, that's when the justices indeed do step in. And this needs to be treated on an individual basis. So when you think about all this, here's really what's at stake here. So if the Supreme Court eventually rules that Section 922 is unconstitutional, constitutional, cannabis users could regain the right to purchase and possess firearms, especially in states where marijuana is legal. But even if the court strikes it down, the government could still impose narrower restrictions, like risk-based evaluations or mental health reviews. Then on the other hand, if the court upholds the current ban, it could make future challenges a lot harder, especially for people who only use cannabis and don't have any other criminal conduct. So really, either way, this will be a defining moment for cannabis civil rights and then some. So now, for my international viewers, this is why you should care about this story. Why? Well, because U.S. legal shifts always ripple north and across the world. When America's top court considers a case like this, investors, politicians, and regulators all pay attention. So a ruling that recognizes cannabis users as responsible citizens could strengthen global arguments for reform, not just around gun rights, but around how governments define lawful cannabis use in general. So really, it's part of a much bigger story about normalization and really in fairness. So when you look at all this, here's what's next and here's what needs to happen now. The Supreme Court justices are expected to meet this Friday to review which of these new cases they might officially take on. If they grant what's called cert, arguments would likely happen early next year and a decision could come in mid to late 2026. So here's what to watch for. 1, which case gets selected? 2, how broadly the court frames the question. And then 3, what early signals appear in any written statements or dissents. So in conclusion, these details will tell us how far they're willing to go in redefining gun rights for cannabis users. And the US right now, as usual, is at the epicenter. So to sum it up, the Supreme Court denied one case, but the issue is still alive and very much in play. Marijuana Moment was first to report that several other challenges are already lined up for discussion, and one of them could finally force the justices to confront whether cannabis users deserve equal rights under the Second Amendment. So whether you're a consumer, investor, or policy watcher, this is one story to follow closely. As I keep saying, the laws in America need to be modernized. So a quick nudge. Come on, Washington, need some direction. All right, that's it for our latest TDR Cannabis in 5 presented by Dutchie. Leave your comments below. Let us know what needs to happen here. And yes, how much are you frustrated with the outdated laws that are currently going on in the US? We'd love to get your feedback. So again, leave your comments below. As usual, if you like this breakdown, give it a like, smash on that bell for all notifications, and greatly appreciate it if you could once again subscribe to us here at TDR. That's it for now. We'll see you in the next TDR Cannabis in 5. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.